do the full screen sharing. Should be able to share this full screen. Let me. 1 second. Oh, I see. If I do that, I will not be able to see the comments. That kind of sucks. Good morning, everyone. We will get started in about 1 moment. Just wanting everyone to come in. We will have soon as the other sessions are just ending, so we'll allow people some time to just kind of come in and get comfortable before we get started. All right, hello, everyone. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. All right. Good morning, everyone. It is 10:01, and we have about 50 minutes in this session today. Well, really about 55. And we have quite a bit to cover. So I know that people are going to be trickling in. That it's absolutely okay. So for those of you who are here, go ahead and drop your name in the chat and where you are from, if you can. That way I just kind of get an idea of who's here, what you're doing, so I can kind of interact with you as we come about. So go ahead and just drop your name and where you're from in the chat, and we will go ahead and get started. Today's session is called God in Play, Enhancing Ministry Through Drama. My name is Reverend Amina McIntyre. This is the Rethinking Church conference. I am a playwright and a scholar. I have pastored in the CME church and ordained in the CME church. I am a PhD student at Vanderbilt University in religion, specifically religion, psychology, and culture. But more importantly, I am someone, hey Jillian, I am someone who absolutely loves theater. I'm someone who absolutely loves looking at different kinds of ways that we can bring God's word to the work that we are doing, and all the ways that we can, as Dr. McNeil has said this week, help to proclaim the word of God in more tangible ways. I'm one who believes that we have to really cater to the many senses and cater to the many learning styles. And drama then is one of the ways that we can do it. And as I mentioned, as you come in, you go ahead and drop your name in the chat and where you're from. So I know, feel free to interact with me, because drama is a collaborative experience. And so I kind of want to know who's here if I can, and at least kind of get your comments. And I'll try my best to keep some time to pay attention to the comments as we move things along. So as I mentioned today, the name of my presentation is God in Play. I'm going to share my screen very quickly. Enhancing ministry through drama. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to really first talk about what is drama. We're going to talk about how you can do it, some things to keep in mind, some resources that you can do when you're trying to work with drama yourself, and how you can do it. Because I think that a lot of times we come to a lot of conferences and everything sounds really wonderful and really awesome, but sometimes we are like, well, how do we take it back to where we're going? And we kind of get to be at a loss. And so today we're also going to drop some practical things in for you to know about drama ministry, and also just knowing how you can incorporate, and ways in which you can incorporate drama into worship, into your current worship environments, and maybe even do something that kind of maybe something special for the church as well. And so what you will see in the course of this are a lot of pictures from drama ministry productions that we've done. And some of those drama ministry productions they kind of look homegrown, because they are. And most of our churches, when you're doing drama ministry, a lot of times it's going to be hands on deck. You're going to see homegrown. You're going to see the people in the church really being a part of drama, which is very different often than when you go to theaters. A lot of times when you go into theaters, the work is a lot more polished, and you may see different things. But for us, especially when we're thinking about churches, there may be some polishing, but there may also very well be some very much DIY kind of work. And so you will see those kind of pictures along the way, because this is the kind of representation of what you tend to have when you are in your worship environment. So what is drama? Everyone has had some sort of experience with drama. So if you can type briefly in the chat for me, what has your experience been with the art, specifically theater and drama? Just go ahead and drop in the chat what it is for you, where you've seen it, that kind of thing. I'll give you all just a second to do it. Just what is drama? What is theater? Where have you seen it? How have you seen it? What is it for you? And you can just drop one word. You can drop a whole line. I'm here for it. So. And I will go ahead and say that for me, drama is, I'll show some other definitions, but also for me, drama is the performative element. Okay. So we have Louis Karima Lewis. I'm from New York, so theater has always been a big part of my life. Absolutely. New York is kind of the theater capital of the US. I mean, you have Chicago and LA theater and even Atlanta theater, but New York kind of sets the pulse in what theater has been and where and how it exists. Absolutely. See. Anyone else? And you all can kind of keep commenting, and I'll just come back to the comments as we go along, because I do want to make sure that we interact as we go in this particular process. And so drama is a unique tool to explore and express human feeling. It is story conveyed through performance, and it is derived from the Greek word meaning drama, meaning action. And so typically when you think about and when you hear about drama and when you hear about theater, you're going to hear about it from a Greek perspective. That's not the only place that theater has existed, but very much all of the theatrical discipline is very much rooted in Greek drama, and a lot of the theory has also been through that. Jillian says she's been exposed to godly playing before I became a minister. I was a youth minister and used drama and visualization with different age groups. Still feel it's an important part of ministry. Thank you so much for sharing that. Absolutely, I feel the same. because drama is also a performative kind of thing, is something that is performance, we have to consider the fact too where drama is and where performance has been within us, and what that impact might have on the kind of ministry that we're doing. I do want us to kind of talk about too, in thinking about drama, is that first of all, there is, for some churches, there have been a sacred and secular split. I want to first go ahead and say that theater was birthed out of the church. If you look at ritual in any culture, the ritual in any culture also has a theatrical element to it. Ritual in any culture also has a performative element as well to it, and also has very intentional motions, intentional things. If you chart out an entire worship service, you will very much see that there are a lot of the parallels of actually walking through theatrical space and walking through an actual production really kind of follows a worship outline in so many ways, even down to the point at which you bring in the audience or the congregation into worship space. And so because theater was birthed out of this, we have to always kind of remember that there is a ritual space and a ritual element that automatically comes in if you are doing theater in the space. Now, what has happened though, and the reason why most people have kind of split the two is because and we talk about Greek history. At one point, while they were doing church dramas and such, there was a faction that decided to split and decide to say that they wanted to worship the god of Dionysius. And the god of Dionysius is not necessarily the God that we serve. I will put it in that way. And what happens is then you have this split between the sacred and the secular. But this happened mostly in European churches and happened a lot more, especially like in Greek churches. And so what they did was they started making spaces where theater could occur and spaces where theater would happen. And so the church persons did not engage with theater necessarily in that way. And there's actually a group of people now who feel like if you are doing some sort of theater that you should just do dramatic readings of the Bible and the word and not actually do performance. For persons who are not of European descent, this split never happened. And so there is also kind of this conversation and kind of this tension between at what point can you bring dramatic works in, and this also even happens over art. Like, what point do you bring in dance, and is dance okay? Is mime okay? Is drama okay? Are all these things actually available to do work, to be in part of worship? And I think that particular conversation has to come with understanding the history behind the fact that this split did actually happen, and at least this conversation of what's considered quote unquote secular and what is considered secular is. And so for some people, they may also kind of be resistant to it. However, when we're thinking about it, as I mentioned before, theater is birthed out of the church. So is birthed out of ritual. Victor Turner talks about this. Malidoma Somé talks about this. When you think about ritual studies and thinking about how to get into worship space in itself, we talk about specifically about how these particular performative elements are also a part of worship. And I want us to really think about, as we go through enhancing and thinking about enhancing drama and God in play, the fact that that when we're starting to think about theater in this way and think about drama in this way, we are talking about it in a worship environment and using it as a tool to incorporate into worship settings and a worship space. And so I do want to kind of point out then, as we're having this kind of conversation about the Greek split and everything like that, the places where even the arts are included in the Bible. And even these are just like some of the more just the kind of the initial conversations about the arts in different spaces. So first one is for, if you're musicians, you typically know Genesis 4 and Jubal, the son of Lamech, is a musician. In Exodus 31, 1 through 18, Bezalel and Aholiab are artisans. And so they are actually builders. And so they're the ones who actually help construct and put together the worship space and help put together the temple and actually make sure that things are together. And that is also important to think about too, that when you're thinking about the arts in the Bible, it is more than just the one element of it. Is more than just persons who are performing. It is also, of course, when you go into the church and how church is constructed, it's the reason why, if you think about for us, even that we change out our particular liturgical linens, if you follow liturgical calendar, and certain colors matter and certain things matter, and certain particular ornamental things are set in space for us to do that. And so I do want to just kind of point out that the artisans were also kind of brought in to actually to cater to what we actually see in the particular space. One of my favorites is Exodus 15:20, when Miriam dances, and they dance as a result of celebration and proclamation because of the deliverance of God. And also too, there's probably really only one real space where the word theater is, well, a couple, like two spaces where the word theater is denoted, and they are both in Acts 19, and it is when Paul is talking about going into the theater or not going into the theater. But by that time, there'd already been that kind of conversation about sacred and secular. Remember, we're talking about the Greek here, and what's happening in that space. And so, but they're talking about it specifically as a location where theater takes place. And so I do want to just kind of point out where those are in biblical space so that we can also have some scriptural reference about where the arts are in the Bible. And so, so what I'd love to know is, and then some of you have already said, it's like, we have someone who's from New York, and they've already talked about how theater has just been a big part of their life because they live in New York. We have Jillian from South Africa talking about how being a minister has been used to help dramatize and visualize things for different age groups. What other ways have you seen drama? Where have you been where you've seen drama? Where have you been where you have seen drama in action? And if you can just kind of even just drop one word in the chat for me so we can kind of see just the array of places that we have been, that we have seen drama and how we've experienced it. Yeah. So, and while you all are typing, I'll go on to the next slide. And I'll tell you some of the places that I've seen drama, because I think that that's also important to think about. We often, this is my favorite little chipmunk, just doing worship and praise here. So we've often seen like Easter and Christmas skits. We've seen it in the community. Absolutely. So it's which kind of even where I'm getting to like schools and elementary, middle and high schools. You may have seen it in formal theatrical spaces. You may also have seen it in television, because sometimes different from film, even they are actually taping plays and films and actually showing them on TV. And they've been doing that for a long time now. PBS has always done it. And you can always go back and find different particular performances and productions and in on screen in different places. And also too, like in your home, like for example, one of my favorite experiences of drama and theater is when my dad would do storytelling, and my dad would act out all of the characters in story and actually get us involved in it and do some impersonation and things of that nature. And so you can think about the fact that drama has been seen already, both in formal and informal spaces. And that's really important to know, because most people have already engaged themselves somehow in drama or in the dramatic moment. They just may not necessarily have thought of themselves as enacting in those particular, engaging in those moments in that way. And I do want to, and I ask a lot of questions today because I just kind of want to get a feel for where everyone is and what they're doing, what their experience is. But I want you to kind of be thinking about, how would you like to see drama in your church? In what ways would you like to see drama in your church? In what ways, if you could do a magic wand right now and be like, I want to put drama in my church at this moment, how would you like to see it? And go ahead and just kind of drop those little moments, how you would like to see it. For me, I've always wanted to see it, of course, as a part of the sermonic moment. I also like to see it as a scripture. I like to see it as in a variety of ways also too, just as a part of, like, for example, I've seen people use the offering as a way of great ministry, where people dance and move and actually have a dramatization piece that kind of introduces why the offering is important, and it kind of helps to lead people so that people can feel like they can bring their full offering to Christ. I mean, and so for me, it's like that's how this is how I would love to continue to see, and how I've seen it as well in the church. And this particular play is actually that you see, and is actually like a Resurrection Sunday play. And we actually did it in the pulpit. This was a part of a play called Living Right that I actually have available here. That is a fuller church worship particular service, and this is one of the scenes in Living Right that actually happened on Sunday morning as we talked, and the actual play itself was in lieu of the entire worship service and incorporated the entire worship elements. So three of the things that I want us to kind of think about as we're thinking about drama, because of course we're talking about the broader sense of theater, the broader sense of how drama is integrated into worship. But there are three things that I want us to always remember. Okay. Yes, we need to incorporate drama into our Black History celebrations that bring all the churches together. Absolutely. And that's actually typically where you see drama the most, is when you're in Black History celebrations or specific special days, because it's a lot easier oftentimes to convey or to bring the full community in when you are pulling into those particular moments. But I do want us to remember, as we are thinking about God in play, and we're talking about enhancing ministry and drama, that there are three things that I always like to remember. There are more, but these are the big three, I think, for me. First of all, drama is ministerial. Drama is ministerial. If you are going to elect to use theater as a way of working within your worship, you have to approach it with the same diligence and reverence as you would a sermon. You need to, if it's going to be biblically based, they all should have some connection to the Bible, but make sure that you have exegeted whatever text you're going to do. Make sure that you have thought about the ministry purpose, and make sure you think about the fact that drama should be interwoven into the worship. So this is not an ornament. This is God work. So this is not something that you just kind of drop in like, oh, this seems like fun today. This is the work we're doing. So if you are using it for Black history, then you are saying we are using this to convey this particular history, so that we can talk about how that has happened, how this history has happened, and how God has been in this particular experience the entire time. This is God work. Jillian talks about favorite acts of drama in African culture is Holy Week. For example, with Palm Sunday, the community meets at an area away from the church and walks to the church waving palm leaves and inviting people onto the street to join it and to attend the service. Absolutely. That is a way of even showing it in a ministerial way, where here it is, we're talking about Holy Week, we're talking about Palm Sunday, and we're enacting Palm Sunday for the purpose of demonstrating what it is that the Bible probably would have experienced, the biblical people may have experienced when they walked through the streets. And so that people can also get invited to come in as a result of that. And you also probably get people's attention too, as a result of it. And the purpose for that then is also to kind of bring people into the work that you are doing. Which kind of leads me to the next question, which is, it has to be intentional. You have to think about what form you're going to have in there, when in the service you're going to put it, for what purpose and what possible impact. You may not necessarily have a worship service every Sunday that lends itself to drama. And that is absolutely perfectly fine. And when you do it, it should be a part of something that's already in the worship act. Is it a part, as I mentioned before, is it a part of scripture? Is it a part of the call to worship? Is it a part of the altar call? Is it a part of the offering? What point of service is this particular dramatic moment supposed to be there? Or if it is in lieu of the worship service, does it have all the worship moments in it and all the elements so that it can point to this? And this is important because you absolutely want to make sure that everything you do in worship anyway should be intentional. There should never be a point in worship that you're wondering, okay, well, that was cute, but I don't really know how that actually leads to the overall theme of the day or the overall moment that we're supposed to be getting out of the worship. And it is very important that we always worship and we incorporate things with intention. Absolutely thinking about how we're meditating on God. What is it that you want people to get out of the service, and how it might possibly impact people as they leave? Are you creating an environment where people may want to go out and take it to other people? Are you creating an environment where you want to bring people in and actually do some healing around that? And if those are the cases, what did you put in place to make sure that people can be in that space? Because that goes back to the ministerial element of thinking about not just what you're putting out, but also how you're going to work with and heal people and cater to the needs of the persons who come about for that. I could go on and on all day about intentionality and what intentional worship looks like, et cetera, et cetera. But I want us to then kind of move on to relational. So for me, also thinking about drama as the fact that it requires fellowship. Drama requires collaboration. Drama requires conversation. Drama requires evangelism. Drama, because of the way that it already is set up, is not done in a vacuum. even if you are someone who is doing a one person something, you likely have a director, you likely have somebody who is helping to maybe play your music. You are likely also having somebody who is helping you. You might have borrowed some piece of your costume from somebody. You cannot do drama in a vacuum by itself. It is not. That's not how it works. It is absolutely relational. It always is going to involve the community somehow. And we could talk about that a little bit later about all the different kinds of ways that drama can also involve community, but it is relational. There is nothing about drama that does not also include fellowship and collaboration and conversation and evangelism. We'll talk about that a little later on, but I do think that those are the things that you kind of really kind of think about and kind of remember as you are thinking about drama, that these particular, if you get nothing else out of this today, remember these three elements. Because those are, especially when you're doing drama for worship, you want to always remember that this is the reason, this is the tool that you are using for this particular purpose. And this is just one of the various tools that you can use for this purpose. And so there are a couple different ways that you can implement. And so you have some weird little pictures of people doing all kinds of things. And so you have kind of to the left, you have pictures of persons gathering, and to the right, I'm enacting a particular character from one of the plays that we did in our church. But keep in mind, you may already be doing a lot of these. And from the chat, some of you have already mentioned how you're already incorporating drama into worship. So something simple may be dramatized sermons. So talking with your pastor, or if you are the pastor yourself, thinking about a way that you can dramatize your sermon or add a dramatic element to your sermon that kind of walks through the performance, the performative element. So most people, at least I don't know that everyone does this, but you should rehearse your sermon before you get up and preach it. I don't know that everyone does that, but you really kind of should. But if that's the case and you do rehearse your sermon, then putting those particular dramatized elements inside of the sermon. So also too, if in terms of dramatized sermons, you can also incorporate other people into it. And so whereas you are maybe doing a sermon and people may be enacting some of the things that you're saying as you're going along. And it's typically a very kind of a much easier way of just kind of incorporating drama into the work. You can also do monologues as spoken word or short skits, such for the scripture and the sermon, as we've talked about before. And you can also do larger productions. And so we will talk about all three of those particular ways today, just those particular ways today that might be ways that you can consider and think about the work that you are doing in your space. And so dramatized sermons, this particular picture is from an ordination service where the pastor was talking about it was an ordination service, and they were talking to new ministers about the fact of how pastoring was like being a fisherman. And so he had 6 points. He dressed up and had his actual, he actually had a fishing rod and everything. He had his little pail with him, and he talked about the different elements, everything from what to wear to the hat, also to putting the bait on the hook and how to take care of yourself in that particular moment. And I think that's very important because this is probably one of the more memorable sermons that I remember seeing, because everything was kind of walked together in this space. But one of the things that you think about when you're thinking about dramatized sermons is you're going to think about the length of your sermon. You're going to think about how long the sermon is going to be, because as I mentioned before, because you want to make sure that it's ministerial, intentional, and relational. You want to make sure that that it does not overly elongate your sermon. So if it takes your sermon way too long or makes it something that becomes very, very that doesn't actually help with some of the timing of it, depending on, so if you're a 45-minute preacher and it's going to make your sermon an hour and people know that you do stuff in 45 minutes, or if you're a 15 or 20-minute sermoner and it's going to take it to way longer, then you may want to really think about how that might work and how this could be incorporated or how it doesn't. Another way that you can think about it is just by adding props. As I mentioned before, the preacher, the fisherman sermon by Reverend Poole, who's sitting here hanging out. You can also do just another thing that you can do in terms of using, you can use props or you can use actors. And so you can actually use larger props. You can use larger people, and those people may be the ones operating the props, and they can be something that you can possibly work with. Now, some people may have seen, and I'm going to pick on them for a second, but there's a particular preacher not too long ago who, as a part of his worship, he was preaching and he just got like a kiddie pool. I'll be honest, to this day, I don't know what the kiddie pool was for. But it's because you don't want the prop or what you do, or if you have other people doing the work, for it to be an antic. You want it to be something that is very intentional. So, did you need a kiddie pool? You may not need a kiddie pool. You might just be able to show a picture of a pool if that's what the intent that you're trying to do. And also, too, you want to think about, for me, for large, I'm thinking about there's water on stage and you have a microphone. Make sure that you think about your safety if you're doing a prop or an actor. So if you are having a prop or you're using an actor, you want to think about how the prop actually works within the work that you are doing. The next thing is object sermons. And so how is an object sermon different than a prop? Okay, so typically the props for me are something that you might use that are, for example, a seat is a prop, or a table might be a prop, or you might have a Bible as a particular prop. So it's just kind of enhancing the work that you're doing. An object in particular may be, especially if you're doing an object sermon, it may be a sermon that is about that specific object. And so the focus will be on the object and you kind of do a deeper dive into the object. So instead of the prop assisting you in your particular sermon, then the object is the focus and the center of the particular sermon. So this is for you all to do. And this is your homework assignment, because I know you didn't think you were going to get homework. Yay, go homework. Is dramatized sermon. So think about, and you can do it a couple different kinds of ways, but choose an object in the room that you're currently in now and create a sermon topic for it. Choose an object that you're in the room now. And while you're here, if you want to, while you are walking with us here, you can go ahead and drop in your chat what object you might possibly think or choose to use for your particular sermon. But choose an object in the room and create a sermon topic around it. You get your 3 points or main story arc, however you construct your sermonic moment. Consider possible scriptures. Consider how you want to present it, and then present it in worship coming up soon. So this is your particular homework if you like to do that, because I think that that's important for us to remember, that these things can already be dropped into worship in the way that we have done things ourselves. So, all right. And you will get this PowerPoint at the end. So if you want to kind of keep this homework assignment for later, you're welcome to do so. And so next thing I want to kind of talk about in our time left, we have about 20 minutes left. Don't want to kind of talk through some things. So we want to talk about monologues, spoken word, and skits. And so for me, I actually put 10 to 20 minutes, but they actually can be shorter than this. Like some monologues, you can have shorter than 10 minutes skits and monologues. And most of them that you find, like Abingdon Press and a lot of different places, are only probably about 5 minutes or less. There are some larger, longer worship pieces and skits and monologues, especially if you do like spoken word pieces, and a lot of them even on YouTube are probably between about 7 and 10 minutes long. Some of them are 3 to 4, but a lot of them for worship are even a little bit longer, like 7 to 10 minutes. Sometimes I've seen one that was 13 to 15 minutes, but it is rehearsed with a very specific message. It is used as a teaching tool. It is used as typically the scripture, the sermon, or in other elements within the worship, but it is something that is rehearsed, and it is, as I mentioned before, it goes back to being ministerial. It goes back to being intentional, and make sure that it's also relational. And so they said those take a little bit more time to develop. So this is not something that you're going to, if you're writing it yourself, this is not something you're going to write the night before. This is something that you're going to probably be thinking about a week or two. I would even say months in advance. Honestly, 2 to 3 months in advance if you're thinking about doing something a little longer, because it's going to just take the time to really think about it. And you can do something that's 10 to 20 minutes or 20 minutes or less in a month's time, but you also have to think about the fact that if you're someone who's going to have to use a teleprompter, or you have to memorize some things, how long does it take you to memorize some things? And if that's the case, think about, what your abilities are, or that particular person's abilities are. And also too, if you spend that time and take deeper dives into it, then you yourself can also kind of be more integrated into the ministry and integrated into the work that you are working on for that particular moment and for that particular process. So, and this is one, and I'll drop this particular thing in the chat. We're not going to show it here today, but I did one with a friend of mine. It's called Love Intervention, and it's based on the 1 Corinthians 13. It was a sermon it was the sermon for the day. It was inspired by a spoken word poem called Ready or Not by Genetics and Ezekiel. If you look it up online, it is absolutely fabulous. It is about it is a 13-minute spoken word piece, but it was used as a young adult Sunday sermon. And their full video is on Vimeo. And like I said, I'll drop it in the chat if people are interested for later on. And you can also take a look at it in the actual presentation when you receive it. But this particular sermon itself, as I mentioned before, it is a particular skit that was the sermon for the day. And so it was everything that was interwoven into worship was made sure that it was incorporated and built up around this part so that it was just a part of the worship service. And so this is us doing some work on stage here. So that brings us to then the third portion, which is skits and productions. And so the skits and productions are longer, like much longer. So we're talking like 1 to 2 hours. This can be within or in lieu of service. It could also be an alternate event that can also be outreach. It can also be as something that you have developed that is a particular play itself, or it can be in a reenactment, such as like the Seder meal or something like that. And so it can be something that can be very interactive, or it can be something that is in lieu of a particular worship environment. And so the skits of the larger productions themselves take just a lot more work. So those are the ones that really take about 3 to 4 months of planning and intentional work with doing those particular things that you have. And this is where you kind of can get more of the environment involved. I mean, more of the community and the church even itself involved. So before we go into, because I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about, now that I've talked about these things, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking, just kind of give you all a little bit of a moment to ask questions if you have any about the three. And then we'll kind of go into how you yourself can do these things within your work. If you are someone who is new to drama ministry or someone who has incorporated theater but might want to think of a different kind of way to do it, the next kind of things that we talk about will be just how to incorporate them yourself and how to kind of go about the process, especially if you're doing a larger production. And so I just want to make a space for questions if there are any, or any other particular comments, if there are any comments so far that we might have for this particular process. So, and the picture in the back of this one is of a play called Living Right. I mean, no, that's not Living Right. I'm sorry. This Angels Academy, where we had the angels to come out and to talk about, basically it was training angels. And so the archangels were training persons who were new angels. And it basically tells the entire Christmas story. So are there any questions about those three different kinds of forms, either the sermonic form or the monologues or shorter skits or the larger production? Okay. All right. So I don't see any in the chat so far, but please feel free to ask any questions if there are any, and we can kind of talk about some things. Okay, so I have one question. Can you share any resources in drama ministry skits and monologues? Absolutely. So I actually, at the end of this particular presentation, have resources for drama ministry and books that I've used even to start drama ministries, as well as some places that you can find some of them that are done. Abingdon Press, as finding plays, I've written a few. There are people online typically who have quite a few of them. If you, I have some of the links that you can Google, as well as, and also just some of the links that you can click on and go to. Very typically though, and I will say this as someone who's a playwright, I've actually written a lot of my own work, largely because sometimes the dramas can fall, and this is kind of my gripe sometimes with Christian drama. Sometimes they're like, okay, so we're Christians, so it can feel a little flat, or they try to make characters a little bit more one-dimensional. And I'm just not a one-dimensional person. I like to have my characters be a little bit more complex. And so I've actually just written for my church and for the work I've done, but that's a totally different class and a different conversation about how to write your own dramas that can actually really be more relevant. But definitely, if you go to Lifeway, they actually do have some books that are just kind of like basic skits and things. They do have everything from like the Drama Ministry Handbook, which is in the back, and different kinds of just drama for church. There's also one that actually just recently came out, probably about 3 years ago, about introducing and doing a drama in the Black church specifically, and kinds of things to be productive. My work is actually on Amazon, and I will drop the links in here by the end of of the worship. And my particular ones that I do have produced are for full length plays, or like, well, are 1 hour plays or plays that can be done in lieu of a worship service. But I can drop those into the chat before the end of the class, at the end of the class, so that we have them and so that you have access to them as well. So, yeah, so let's keep going. So I'll talk about some backstage notes here, especially if you're doing some drama ministry things, some things to kind of keep in mind, some little cheats that I've had and ways that I've kind of encountered ministry. And I will say, and for me, I have an MFA in playwriting. And when I came back to Atlanta in 2009, I was finishing up my MFA, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, at the time I wasn't, I was just starting out in theater. And so in the time trying to find opportunities for productions in Atlanta in the theatrical world was a little harder for me. And I wasn't getting, like, now I'm doing commissions and I'm having different things produced a lot more, but at the time I wasn't. And so it literally was a pastor who was just like, hey, come on, and why don't you just write something for us? And it became this larger thing, and also a way for me to also just kind of flex some of my own skills and to kind of enrich how I do storytelling, because the biblical source material is the best source material. I'm gonna tell you, like, everything is in the Bible. Like, if you don't believe me, just watch. I literally have, and it's something that I'm working on. I don't mind telling you why. I really have this idea for Real Households of Genesis, and just walking through the lineage of like all of Jacob's lineage, and like going from like Abraham and Sarah all the way down, and then talking about, because that in itself is a whole soap opera if you read it. And so don't ever underestimate the source material that is already there for us in that space. So, all right. So how can you do it? So I want to just kind of give a quick and dirty. There's a lot more information toward the end that I will say that you can just kind of read at your own leisure. But one of the things I do want to just want to kind of give you some ideas and some understanding of how to do it. So this is a Resurrection Sunday or Easter Sunday service kind of play. As you can see the cross and the quote unquote thorns and the persons who are walking Christ to these final moments. So how can you do it? You want to think about your time. You want to think about your location. You want to think about the audience and the message specifically for the church, traditional versus contemporary. Remember, going back to the idea from the beginning, is it ministerial? Is it intentional? Is it relational? Think about also the style. Is it going to be a dramatized sermon? Is it going to be a short performance? Is it going to be a full production? If you think about all of those things, it can tell you and give you clues as to how to map this out and how to make this actually work for you, how to do this particular work, and making sure that it's feasible. Because sometimes people are like, we're going to do this big production and you got like 3 weeks. Don't do that to your people. Just don't do it to your people unless you're going to hire out professional folks who can do something in a truncated time frame. Things to consider. You want to think about, of course, the character, if it's biblical or not, the plot, the genre. So, all right. So we tend to, in the church, we tend to not think about genres. We either think that it has to either be like, you have like a cute little drama or a cute little tragedy, or you might have some comedy. A lot of times we kind of steer away from comedy. Literally, the church is the place where all of it should happen and all of it should be there. One of my favorite plays that we've actually done that I didn't write is called the Slabtown District Convention by Nanny Helen Barrows. I talk about it all the time because it is literally it is a missionary meeting, and it is like a 2-hour long play. The point is that people can come in and out at their leisure at the time, but it's absolutely hilarious. And it's talking about things that everyone knows. Everybody has always said, oh, I know that person that just showed up on stage. And there's definitely something that is just kind of like satirical and just kind of talking and poking fun at the work we're doing. So if you can't laugh in church, where can you laugh at? Is kind of also what I'm saying. And you can also think about whether or not it's going to be for ritual space. And so some of my backstage notes, as I like to call them, rehearsal. Yes, please do rehearse. So in professional theaters, in a perfect world, they have about 1 hour for every minute on stage of rehearsal time. I recognize that is not probably going to happen for a church. I get that. They're not professional theater actors. Sometimes there are people who don't have any acting experience whatsoever and just want to be a part of the production. But I would suggest having 30 minutes for every minute of rehearsal time. and 30 minutes for every minute of rehearsal time on stage. So that means that if you have something that is under 10 minutes, you're going to be doing like 2 to 3 rehearsals, probably, maybe 2. But if it's closer to 10 minutes, probably 3, just so you can make sure that it's polished and has everything that you need. If it's longer, you're going to be looking at 10 to 12 rehearsals, and some of those rehearsals will probably be between 2 and 3 hours long in order to get the time that you need. You can't cheat time when it comes to rehearsing and actually really doing something for the purpose. It is kind of the thing at the beginning. You have to study and show yourself approved. You have to really and treat this as ministry. You don't want your pastor skipping out on a sermon or cutting corners on their sermon. Don't cut corners if you're going to do this work. Really do it with some intention, really do it with some with the work, and keep it as serious as it needs to be. You can have fun, you can play with it, but keep it serious. Also set a contract with the rehearsal schedule for your actors. Okay. On the very first day, you're going to be in this play. Yay. I'm so glad. Here is a list of all of the scenes with the actors. Everyone is going to be in at least once a week. And you're always going to kind of run it. But for me, the contract just basically says you agree to be a rehearsal when you say you're going to be here. People will never show up to the first 2 rehearsals because they don't think you're serious. They just don't. And then after a while, they're like, oh, shoot, there's a lot of rehearsals. And you're like, yeah, you have to do it. So you have to be patient. But people tend to, the first couple rehearsals, it might take a little bit of time until you have trained people to get into really being willing to rehearse, and then doing a commitment and really understanding the work that you're doing. So when you're starting out, if people don't all show up or don't understand why they have to come to the rehearsal, if they feel like they know their part, just be patient. I've been there. Trust me. It is mind-numbing. It is frustrating, but it is what we do. But encourage people to stick with it. Here's a sample rehearsal schedule, and I'll change it. I'll send it out. Many people do it different kinds of ways, but this is how I do my particular rehearsal schedule. The first one might just be introductions and a read through, and then we kind of talk through things. And for church persons, I typically, instead of walking it through scene by scene, I typically try to consolidate rehearsals. Either I might do scene by scene, but I also do a lot of character rehearsals for people to have rehearsed, so that they have the time to kind of get deeper in their characters and have those particular conversations, and actually exegete the work the way that we exegete it too. I do encourage people to memorize lines. I have people be off book as they would. They can call line, do the little tricks of theater, actually have them read it over and over and over again. If they need to memorize their lines, they can learn from the bottom up. There's ways of doing that. Decide early if you're going to let people improv your work. I don't like people to improv my work, but in church, this is a reality that people improv. So just kind of look into what kind of play that you might have to see that if it's something that is allowed. So if you do something that's a little bit more formal, then yeah, you could get into some legal trouble if you change it without permission. But if it's something that you've written or something that a particular community is doing, you don't have to be as lean. You can be a little bit more lenient. But I think it's also a cool moment to get people to kind of push out their comfort zone. Like, hey, no. See if you can memorize what's here the way that it is done, so that you can actually have it in this way. Another thing is, and so this is for me, these are some costuming notes. And I do want to also kind of talk a little bit about costuming and community and setting props and community. One of the things that I have learned is that I have gotten more involvement from my church members when I ask them when I say, oh, I need costumes. All of a sudden, seamstresses, whole people who are like, oh, I've been sewing for like 20, 30 years, and I would gladly make a costume if you bring me fabric and if you bring me thread. Okay, great. That's your job. But I've literally had people walk up to me and be like, oh, can I make that for you? Or, oh, I have these things in my closet. Can I bring them in as jewelry for this particular thing? Oh, I have this thing. Or can I be the one to take over and look at all the costumes and actually have people try them on? And can I be the one to troubleshoot that? I've literally had people do that. Also for setting props, as one of the earlier pictures showed, there was someone who was sitting we had a stage. They built that stage for us. So there were pieces of this particular stage that were movable and we could store somewhere, but people went and built it. We were like, we asked the church if they could help us cover some of the materials. They built the stage for us, but there were members of the actual church who were like, we will donate our time and do this for you. So we didn't actually have to go find people. The church just kind of stepped up as a community, wanted to do it. When you're thinking about set the actual stage and the props, think about what's in your environment and in your church. Think you don't always have to go outside. If you're doing a show, you don't have to necessarily go outside your church unless you want to, but just see if you can use the pulpit. See if you can use find out what portion of the church you can use. When I first started doing drama ministry, we could not use the pulpit, or we could not pull certain things out of the pulpit. So we could only do it a certain way. And so we would then do a lot of things on the floor because it was a lot easier, and it was harder for people to see because of it didn't have the elevation, but we had to work with what we could and could not do at the time. And so just kind of know what those are. So you definitely have to be in conversation with whomever is your ministry leader and who is important with that, and you kind of make friends with the folks so that when it does come through, they'll be like, oh, will you at least talk to me about it? For that. Think about also think about your family and friends, and you can always give your family and friends a little shout out in the program, being like, hey, thanks, you were so great. You let me borrow your stuff. Wonderful. Some more backstage notes. So lights and sound. So definitely choose your music ahead of time. Lastly, rehearsals. Have your tech week. If you are a theater artist and you kind of know what your tech is, this church tech week is not theater tech week. That's not going to happen. You're not going to get the level of commitment. You're not going to get the level of thing. So if you are a theater person and you do tech week, just know to go ahead and minimize your expectations. The most you might get out of somebody with lunch provided is about maybe 4 to 6 hours. So do know that your full tech week isn't going to be the same as others, but designate people, teach people, train, be willing to ask people to help do the lights. And even if they're just clicking the lights on and off in the space, that is absolutely fine. But you can also use pole and spotlights. I've definitely used the actual industrial lights. I had dimmers as a way of doing it and rigging it. You can also just find the strip lighting. Sometimes it's not that expensive to find basic strip lighting, but you do also have to have the information, the way of running it and get your backdrops. There are different ways of doing backdrops. Well, if you get books like the Drama Ministry Handbook and some of the other ones that I do actually kind of list, they'll tell you how to build a pole system if you want to do something, or actually you can go out and buy some particular backdrops. It's a lot easier to buy backdrops now because a lot of people are doing more performance. You can get a lot of stuff on Amazon, but you can also just build stuff, and it can be a project. And if you build it the right way, just kind of think about, making sure it's a lot of trial and error. Some things work. Sometimes your poles fall and you have to learn what works better next time around. But I have had all those experiences, but it can also be a fun source of encouraging and working with ministry and building collaboration with people. Also remember, as we mentioned before, that all the arts are all interrelated and all connected. So there's collaboration, there's music, there's dance, there's mime, there's other things. This can also be a source of fundraising. I won't go into all of that, but that's something deeper. But also make sure that you market, make your, even if you have, when I started doing some of this stuff, it was just Adobe, but now there's Canva. You can make whole commercials. And I didn't play it at the beginning of this one, but I may play it at the end. But I made I have a little 30-second introduction of myself that I've made in Canva as a video. And it literally is just pictures and some music. So you can do all these things in Canva nowadays, make little commercials, postcards, but do actually let people know, and don't let people know the night before. Let people know that you're doing it so that they can be prepared for it. And so one of the things that I learned that I don't do well, and I'm just learning now to just ask people to be in charge of it, is to take pictures and even get videos if you can videotape the performance. If you have more professional actors, you won't be able to take the pictures, or you may not be able to actually video everything. But if it's just church folks who don't mind, you might be able to be like, hey, we'll take a waiver and we'll do this. So these are a list of some of the resources that I've used: developing a dynamic drama ministry for dramatically challenged, developing the church drama ministry, Stephen Peterson's book, Drama Ministry, and the drama ministry. The Drama Team Handbook by Allison Stewart is also a really, really amazing. The one that I was talking about that kind of came out more recently, that's specifically for Black church drama, is the Roosevelt Wright book. And he kind of goes through a lot of things that the drama ministry goes through, but he also keeps in mind specific cultural notes that we typically don't always think about, or aren't always put inside of the thing. But like I said, you can take a picture of the screen, or you will also get this particular PowerPoint, because I'm going to give it to LaKesha so that she can send it out to you all. And I've read all of these, and I also read more of them, and may actually write my own as well, to kind of talk about my experiences with them. And I will drop even my stuff in the chat. But I just want to open it up now for questions. are there any questions that you all have, or and I'll just kind of come larger. We have about 4 minutes. So we want to kind of leave people an opportunity to do some work. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. So yeah. So COVID, right? So theater has had to move online, mostly as a result of no in-person services. And so what we have done, though, there are a couple different tricks that I would suggest. So you can still do, believe it or not, you can actually still do most of the dramas and the things that you would possibly do if you don't want to just find videos. There's a lot of videos just on YouTube. There's a lot of different things that I can and I can email. If you send me your email address, I can send you some of the things. If you send me your email address, I'll just send you just kind of a list of some of the ones that I've seen. I've seen a bunch of readings through COVID, but one of the things is that you can do is, for example, if you do it via Zoom, everybody can have the same virtual background. If you do it also if you do it via StreamYard, which I think is a little bit better if you're doing music, because in StreamYard you can actually people's voices. In Zoom is really amplifies one voice over another, but in StreamYard multiple people can be talking at once, and it's more like an interview style. But you can actually like drop the background in the back of it. People can be singing as a part of it, that kind of thing. I would also too, for example. Very often what I've seen for virtual dramas is there are dialogues, but there are also a lot of virtual monologues. And so what people will do is they will dress up in their spaces. I absolutely suggest, if you don't have yet, I absolutely suggest getting a ring light. Ring lights will save your life. If you are someone who just does any presentation at all, go get you like a $15-$20 ring light. And the $15-$20 ring light will save your entire life. There are some that are a little bit more, amplified and a little bit more high tech and have these other things. My ring light is about 20. Like I got my ring light off of Amazon for $30, and I got the one that actually has one for my phone. So some of the things I've done, because I don't always like the reflection of Zoom, and I don't like my camera. You see, like even the camera on my computer right now is a little fuzzy. Like I don't really like that. That's not something that excites me. And so, but I actually have pre-recorded different elements of things on my screen, and actually had people to. I've actually had people to kind of splice it together for me, because sometimes you can do basic video editing in iMovie if you have a Mac, or in if you are on, like, for example, I mentioned Canva. Canva has some things as well, and some opportunities too for you to do that also can work. And so those are some of the ways I've done it, but you can use your regular skit. You just have to think about, one of the things, the trick is to think about the screen as the stage. And literally just think about the fact that you are showing more than telling, but the words are still going to be there. The things are going to still be there. If you want to make sure that there isn't a risk of technology giving out, because that does happen, you can pre-record your technology, the particular pieces for the technology, and the pre-recorded pieces themselves can actually be played from someone's computer, or even just like uploaded to like YouTube and then played. And in that way, if something does happen, that'll happen. You can kind of work with that. But I do still suggest, so especially if you do it live, I still suggest having a director. I still suggest having a stage manager, or someone who can kind of work with doing all of the tech and the buttons. And just thinking about online, specifically either Zoom or StreamYard, which is where I've seen most things. I've also seen OBX, but OBX is a lot harder to kind of network and navigate if you don't know it. But there's some people who really know how to use, who really use OBX. And I'll, as I'm talking about them, and with StreamYard and with OBX, you really just kind of have to know how to navigate OBX, but it can come out more slicker if you do something like OBX. You can also too, especially even with Zoom and with StreamYard, there are ways and tricks that you can hide people's view and kind of put people's view back into light, so that you don't always have to be the one seeing it. There are tricks and ways that you can do it. Some of the biblical themes of my play. So my play Living Right, and I'll say this note, and then I'll kind of let then let you all go if you have no more questions. Living Right in particular is actually a cluster of parables, and that kind of goes up to the crucifixion of Christ. And so that one actually deals with the Samaritan woman. It deals with the woman with the issue of blood, as well as the little girl who passes away that Jesus resurrects, and it deals with the particular crucifixion itself. I have written the longer plays. Angels Academy deals with the Christmas story. The Angels Academy piece is a trilogy. So the second one deals more with Resurrection Sunday, and it is a sequel. But I've also written shorter, smaller. I haven't published these yet, but I will. I've also written shorter skits just for worship, and they've been everything from Paul and Silas to the First Kings text. I mean, it's literally any possible scripture that you want. And if you also want to talk about, if you yourself want to write some, or if you're like, hey, Amina, can you send me something because I'm looking for something? Send me a note and send me an email, and I'll actually share my contact information. Send me a note and I'll be like, hey, I may have something kind of hanging out that I don't mind sending. One of the things, the only reason, and I will say this about particularly about royalties, for me, for church plays and for churches, I'm not really bent on royalties in that way, because that is my ministry to the church. Now, if it's for theaters, yes, I require compensation in that kind of way. For me, I just ask that you either, if you do take up an offering, give 10% to your church. If it is on Amazon, buy enough copies for all the people in your play. Don't. And it's also because of the cost of the stuff that I have is a little cheaper to just buy all of it instead of try to photocopy all of it. Because once you calculate all the ink and paper, you might as well have just bought all of them and just sent them. And so that way I could just kind of, and otherwise just shout me out, don't plagiarize the word. Just be like, oh, Amina wrote this. And we can do that. But otherwise, absolutely, you're welcome to, and here's my information. The easiest way to catch me is through contact at Lady Loves Her Pen, so that I can kind of keep it in mind. But if you're also like, hey, I really have a play that I want to do, could I maybe commission you? We can talk about commission rates, so that I don't mind writing specialty plays for people, because in their particular context, so long as I know ahead of time and I have time to do it, because I do know that sometimes there aren't always the resources that we need. So thank you all so much. We are actually at 10:59, so we've gone over a little bit, but I will take your email addresses here, and I will email you all some of the things. LaKesha will be emailing out the PowerPoint itself. But if you have any questions, if you have anything that you need from me, feel free to email me. You can also contact me here. If you somehow miss my email address, you can also contact me here in the messaging setting. And I would absolutely love to talk to you and actually love to work with you if you have any questions. But thank you all so much for being a participant. You all are really amazing. And I'm glad that I got a chance to be here with you all today.